The system does not exist to serve you. It exists to continue. And most of the time, you're not outside of it. You are part of what keeps it running. This is where the misunderstanding begins, because most people interpret bureaucracy as inefficiency, as friction, as delay, as failure, forms that repeat, processes that slow, decisions that take too long. It feels unnecessary, sometimes absurd. But what appears inefficient is not accidental, because bureaucracy is not the breakdown of the system. It is the system protecting itself. In stable systems, collapse is delayed, but before collapse, systems learn to preserve themselves. And preservation requires something specific, not speed, not flexibility, not even effectiveness. It requires continuity. This is the first structural shift. The system no longer prioritizes outcomes. It prioritizes persistence. This is the first structural shift. The system no longer prioritizes outcomes. It prioritizes persistence. And persistence requires predictability. So systems begin to reduce dependence on individuals. Because individuals are unpredictable, they improvise, they interpret, they deviate, and deviation introduces risk. So the system replaces intention with rules. Rules do not improvise. They do not interpret context. They do not adapt. They repeat. This is the first pillar of bureaucracy. Rules replace intent. This is the first pillar of bureaucracy. Rules replace intent. Decisions are no longer based on judgment. They are based on compliance. Because once rules replace intent, no one needs to think. And when no one needs to think, the system no longer depends on awareness. It depends on compliance. What matters is not whether the outcome is optimal. What matters is whether the process was followed, because process is measurable. Intent is not. This is the second shift. Responsibility moves from individuals to procedure. If a decision produces a poor outcome but follows the correct process, it is not considered failure. It is considered correct execution. And at that point, doing the right thing becomes less important than doing the expected thing, because the systems evaluate behavior, not results. This is not inefficiency, it is insulation. Because once responsibility is embedded in process, no single actor carries full accountability. And without concentrated accountability, risk is diffused. This is the second pillar. Process becomes priority. Outcomes become secondary. Not because outcomes are irrelevant, but because outcomes are uncertain, and uncertainty is destabilizing. Process, however, is stable. It can be repeated, audited, standardized. It creates consistency, even when that consistency produces suboptimal results. This is a trade-off. Efficiency is sacrificed for reliability. Speed is reduced for predictability. Adaptability is constrained for control. And control is what sustains the system. At this stage, something else emerges. Feedback begins to change. In flexible systems, feedback alters behavior. In bureaucratic systems, feedback is absorbed, not ignored, but processed, delayed, reinterpreted. Because rapid response introduces instability, so response becomes structured, layered, sequential. And in that structure, something happens. The system begins to respond to itself, not to external conditions, but to internal requirements: compliance, documentation, verification. Each step reinforcing the next. This creates a loop, a self-referential system. The third pillar: self-preservation. The system does not operate to achieve outcomes. It operates to maintain operation. Processes generate more processes. Rules generate more rules. Each layer increasing stability and reducing the need for external validation. Because the system is no longer evaluated by what it produces, but by whether it continues. Most people do not resist this. They adapt to it. They learn how to navigate it, how to survive inside it. And in doing so, they help sustain it. Bureaucracy becomes invisible, not because it disappears, but because it becomes normal. People adapt to it. They learn its language, its timing, its constraints. They anticipate delays. They expect repetition, and expectation stabilizes the system. Because behavior adjusts to structure, not the other way around. At this point, bureaucracy no longer feels imposed. It feels inherent, like part of the environment. And environments are not questioned. They are navigated. This is where the deeper structure becomes visible. Bureaucracy distributes responsibility. No single point of control. No single point of failure. Decisions are fragmented across departments, across procedures, across approvals. Each step small, each decision limited. No one controls the system, and because no one controls it, no one can easily change it. This is not accidental. It is a structural resistance. Because concentrated control introduces vulnerability. Distributed control introduces stability. Even if it reduces efficiency, even if it slows action. Because speed introduces risk. And risk is what the system is designed to avoid. So friction is introduced, not as a mistake, but as a buffer. A delay between decision and action, a space where pressure is absorbed, where errors are diluted, where accountability is shared. This is bureaucracy as friction, not as failure, but as protection. Because a system that moves too quickly can break quickly. A system that moves slowly endures, even when it should not. This is the paradox. Bureaucracy preserves systems beyond their usefulness. It allows them to continue operating, even when they no longer function optimally. Because optimal performance is not the objective, continuation is. And continuation requires stability, even if that stability produces inefficiency, even if it produces frustration, even if it appears irrational. Because from inside the system it is rational. It reduces variability. It limits exposure. It ensures that no single failure can collapse the whole. This is the architecture of bureaucracy, not as inefficiency, but as design. A system that can operate without relying on intention is a system that no longer depends on individuals. And a system that no longer depends on individuals does not need to adapt to them. It persists through process, through repetition, through structure. And once persistence becomes independent of intention, removal becomes difficult. Because nothing needs to change for it to continue. No decision is required. No intervention is necessary. The system sustains itself quietly, continuously, without needing to justify its existence. Because a system that no longer depends on intention does not need to convince you. It only needs you to participate, and most of the time, you already are, not by choice, but by structure. And structures do not ask for permission, they continue with you inside them.